Bobby, thank you very much for talking to us at the Gay Marriage No Thanks campaign. We're really grateful to you. Bobby, first of all, tell us a bit about yourself and your own background. Particularly, we're interested in your views about gay marriage and your views about children and gay marriage. But let's hear a bit about you first.
Well, my mom was gay. I am bisexual, by the way. My mom was gay, and she raised me while she was in a lifelong female partnership. So from the age of 2 until 19, I was essentially raised with 2 female parental figures. My father was not very much in my life at that time. And of the 3 of them, often I was closest and felt most bonded with my mother's partner, actually. But my mother died when I was a teenager, and there was a clash upon her death because she had written her last will and testament and given to her female partner the executorship of the estate. There was a codicil that was filed a few months before my mother died, and that one named my father as the executor of the estate. And so it had to go to the courts, and the lawyers had to take over. So I'm very well aware of how unstable things can be when you have a gay relationship that has incorporated into it all kinds of social obligations and relationships, and it's not protected by law. So because of that, I support civil unions or civil partnerships. But 8 years following my mother's death, I myself found myself, I was going through some health problems, and I wasn't sure whether the condition I had was actually going to be fatal or not. And at that moment, I'm sad to say I did not call my mother's partner. I called my father because I wanted to be able to see him at that stage in my life. And he flew to New York City to see me, and I rebuilt my relationship with him. I know that for a lot of people raised by same-sex couples in the future, because of the gay marriage law and gay marriage equality, sort of eradicating any relevance of mothers and fathers, they will have lost the connection to the opposite sex parent. And that's what saddens me and worries me. And that's where my opposition to gay marriage comes from. I understand the importance of affirming the relationship between 2 adults who have a sexual and an emotional union, but at the same time, a child's link to his mother and father is more important. That's more universal because we all have a mom and a dad. Not all of us get into sexual relationships.
But Bobby, some people say, well done, you had 2 mums. I mean, mums are the good people at nurturing babies and that sort of thing. You had 2 mums, weren't you better off than many other people? And did you really miss your dad? Dads quite often are categorized as fairly lazy and absent and out working or whatever. Did you really miss your dad?
Oh yeah, I wanted a dad all the time. I mean, I felt that absence so much growing up, and not having a father figure and longing for some kind of male figure to take care of me, it led me to act out sexually. From a very early age, I was involved with older men, and it was destructive to me. It didn't scar me permanently for life in a way that I couldn't overcome, but it did cause me a great deal of emotional turmoil. And I think one of the dilemmas that's faced by children of same-sex couples is if you're successful, as I am. I graduated 9th in my class at the age of 17 and went to Yale. So I'm the poster boy for everything that can go right in a child's life raised by a same-sex couple. But at the same time, you're being punished for being successful. Because then people say, look, everything was fine. You didn't lose out on anything. You should be grateful for the fact that you didn't have your father figure around and you were going through all this identity crisis and you were sleeping with strange men and everything was all nutty and you were confused. And I don't think that we should foist that on other people. I don't think people should use examples like me as a way to say it's okay for same-sex couples to willingly put children in that situation in the future.
But it's helpful to people outside to understand the turmoil, as you mentioned, that's going through yourself as you're coming out. You don't have a male role model, you have 2 mothers, you're feeling confused, you don't know your identity and so on.
Right. I think having 2 female figures who are kind and loving to you is all added value, but there is an absence. There is someone who's missing. There's a loss. It's kind of like if you were to cut off my right arm and then give me 2 left arms. I'm glad I could use 2 left arms, but I feel the missing right arm.
Well, there are lots of kids that grow up fatherlessness is a big issue in society.
Yeah, and I think it's a disservice to those people to act as though they don't feel the loss. I think anyone who has seen a father die, anyone who's been abandoned by their father, anyone who's seen their parents get divorced and seen their father lose custody knows that that's a loss. That's not some little thing that you can kind of write off and say, well, we're just going to replace it with another woman because that's good enough for you. That doesn't really respect the experience of people as they live it, where you feel that presence in your life that's no longer there.
Bobby, can you give us, you meet with a lot of people who have been brought up by same-sex couples,
Mm-hmm.
like two mums or two dads.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some of the experiences you've come across in your research? And,
Mm-hmm.
and you travel actually the world, at least Europe and
Right.
elsewhere. don't
Yeah,
you?
right.
Can you give us some of the, put it into terms which the ordinary viewer can understand as to the problems that
Right.
the sons of gay fathers might come across?
Well, they're very different. I think that issues faced by gay moms, by kids of gay moms and kids of gay dads are really different. I think when you have two gay moms, a lot of the experience involves, like, as I said, focusing on the missing father figure, but there isn't kind of the sexual turmoil necessarily that I see when I talk to people who are raised by two gay dads. The common theme that I get from talking to people who were raised by two gay dads, or who the ex-wives of gay men who came out of the closet and then took their kids and got custody and raised them with a gay partner, is that often the gay dads have an open relationship. Often they leave their porn around. They're guys. I don't know. They just, there's a certain level of indiscretion that the kids are exposed to because the gay male community is. I've been part of it for a long time, and there are really great things about the gay community. I'm not condemning gay people, but it's not necessarily a place that you want to expose young people to. And a lot of times kids being raised by gay male couples are exposed to things that they're not quite ready for
They're
yet.
much more open about their sexual activity in front of the children, is that what you're saying?
I'm not going to say they have sex in front of the children, but for instance, a lot of them have open relationships. And so some of them, if the kids are already teenagers, they figure the kid's already old enough to handle dad and one and dad two coming home with another man and having fun while the young man's in the house. Sometimes I've talked to the third person, the person who goes home with the two men, and he doesn't know that there's a kid in the house until he gets to the house. And I remember talking to one person who said, I left because I could not have sex with two men knowing that their son was locked in his bedroom in the same house. So there are these things like that where I think that things that maybe gay male culture leads us to view as unremarkable are heavy for a kid. And sometimes in the day-to-day business, as you are busy and you're not so sensitive to things, or you're distracted by all of your obligations, sometimes the gay dads don't realize that this is actually a lot for a kid to deal with. And I know another thing is sometimes girls raised by gay dads, when they themselves begin to become sexual, when they go through puberty and they talk to their dads don't sometimes understand how tender a girl's sexual awakening is, how vulnerable she is, because gay male sexuality is male sexuality, and male sexuality is sometimes, the stereotype is that gay men are callous, or that men are callous sexually, and I wouldn't put it that way, but I think that they don't necessarily, if a man has sex and then the person that he has sex with runs off, it doesn't necessarily hurt him as much as for a girl to do it. And so sometimes girls who are going through the sexual awakening, they go to their gay dads are just like, well, you're of that age, so go do it, and they don't realize how hard it is and how much, soul searching a girl goes through, and how scary it is for a girl the first time she has sex.
Bobby, I think you would say, I'd just like you to explain a bit, you would say that a child's right to their mum and their dad trumps adults' right to be parents. Would that be right?
There is no such thing as an adult's right to be a parent. I think that if you were to ever legally try to enshrine that as a right, if you were ever to try to enforce the principle that adult citizens have a right to have a child in their home under their control, you would essentially be giving citizens the right to control people who are not their children, because at least one, possibly both, of the gay parents in that situation are not actually related to the child. So they acquired the child through some means. And if you're saying that that's a right, you're basically applying the principles of property to human beings. You're saying you can acquire children, and that the children has to be under your power, and that's going to be protected by the courts, and so that if the child runs away, the police can go fetch the child and bring the child back. And that takes us to a very ugly place, because that's the principle that's been enforced through all kinds of human rights abuses in the past, when you start to define human beings as property or as chattel. So I would say no to your question. I don't think it's that a child's right to a mom and dad trumps an adult's right to a child. The adult's right to a child doesn't exist. Adults have obligations to children, and the child has a right to a mom and a dad.
Last question, Bobby. You're on the wrong side of history. Opposing gay marriage, you're on the wrong side of history. History's moving on and leaving you behind. What was your response to that?
I think that history is going to look back at this, and history's not going to be kind to gay marriage as a concept. First and foremost, because it hasn't helped gay people, hardly at all. I mean, if you were to look at the statistics on the gay community, really high rates of anxiety and depression, eating disorders. The suicidal ideation often deals with romantic loss because of unstable relationships. It doesn't deal with homophobia. You're talking about very rampant problems of domestic violence and sexual assault. All of those things, none of that's changing because of gay marriage. I think that people thought that if you legalized gay marriage, it would set off this domino effect, and somewhere down the row of dominoes, you'd have gay people being happier. But the statistics from the Netherlands and Belgium and Scandinavia show that that hasn't happened. Bullying is just as bad. Suicide is just as bad. So history is going to look at this as billions of dollars being spent on a legal change, which effectively did not help the community it was supposed to help. And in addition to it, history will look back at this and say, this was the legal move that caused motherhood and fatherhood to be obliterated as legal concepts, and it redefined children as property. Because ultimately, if you completely remove parenthood, motherhood and fatherhood, that means that you sweep aside the right of a child to a mom and a dad, and at that point the child becomes property, because the child becomes an object that adults have a right to. And history will not look kindly on that, because all the other times in history where people have defined human beings as property, it's turned into a human rights atrocity. And I suspect that that's how history is going to go.
Bobby Lopez, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.